And if while we're waiting for this to load up, if you haven't already done so, please make sure you put your name in the chat so I make sure I get your attendance correct, and that we're both on the same page. That would be lovely. All right, I think we're ready. Well, that's going to be annoying. All right. So developing facilitation skills. So this is, again, going more in depth about some of the things we introduced in the beginning of the semester. Remember that the basis of all the facilitation skills we talk about are attending, listening, and reflecting, okay? And then all of the rest that we talk about in here kind of build off of those three concepts, okay? But let's just start with just some basic definitions of what we mean when we say facilitation skills. Is this is they're used to I can't think all of a sudden to guide and direct key parts of our work, in our case our group work, okay? That's facilitation. Facilitator is someone who helps a group meet their goals, okay? You'll notice that it resists using the word guide or direct. It uses the word help, because one of the misnomers about facilitation skills is that you might have a facilitation manual that provides you with what you need to cover during certain groups, okay? And and with those, it's tempting to say that you're kind of the educator, the teacher, and there are some psychoeducational group where you will present information and present skill development stuff. But our true job as a facilitator is to help the group meet the goals that are common to them at where they're at, and to facilitate their growth and development, okay? So, and there's basically about three principles of any good facilitation, okay? One, a good facilitator draws out opinions and ideas of their group members, okay? They don't seed them, they draw them out, and they help the group members see the direction or the needs that they have, okay? We focus on the how and the what, okay? Not the why. Group members tend to get stuck in the why I'm here, why I'm an addict, why I get in and out of abusive relationships. Hold on.
Dr. Peterson, you said that this PowerPoint is attached in Canvas, correct?
It is, should be.
Okay.
I'm
trying to look for it so I can follow along.
Major breaking news going on here today. The president, of course, is flexing his
I'm trying to find who's not muted.
You will receive a tablet, wireless mouse, charger, smart.
Right, there we go. All right. Let me, let's do this. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. I'm going to go into Canvas and make sure it is there really quick. Okay, it is under lecture and learning material. It's the fourth one down on the list. And Landon, so attending, listening, and reflecting are the three core kind of things that everything is built off of. And thank you for that question. All right, back to this. All right, here we go. And so as I was mentioning, one of the tempting things to do in a group is to really focus on just the why things happen to me, why I'm an addict, why I'm this. One of our jobs as facilitators is to guide the group into the how and the what. Okay. What is it I need to change, and how is it that I need to do it, instead of being stuck in the trauma or in the addictive cycle? How and what do I need to do to go beyond that? Okay. And the other thing on facilitation is that we never take sides. Okay. Even when one group member may be totally off facts or figures or whatever it may be, we never then just side with the other side and say, well, you know, Joe over here called you on that, and you know you're not telling the truth. We don't do those types of things. What we do is that we listen, we reflect back, and then we provide insight about not fact or fiction, but about the situation. So when there is something that is said in a group that seems really erroneous, we still go back to this: attend, listen, reflect, and then create conversation that leads us away from those erroneous beliefs or ideas that someone had stated. Okay. And again, this is when we talk about this is also one of the first steps in trying to resolve any potential conflict that can arise in a group. Is instead of directly challenging something that is stated, we just show that they were listened to, and what their ideas are, and what we know about a given situation. Okay. Now, with that being said, there are going to be certain types of treatment. For example, cognitive behavioral therapy. There are some treatments that do what's called challenges to thought processes. But usually those challenges are a person who can't get in a mental loop that says that they're, for example, a stupid human being. And then they only look for evidence throughout the day to reinforce their feelings of being stupid. Okay. But that's a treatment technique. It's not necessarily the facilitation techniques, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so these are our three principles. And when we're working through facilitation, we should always encourage participation. Okay. Through things like checking for comfort level. How do individual participants feel about what's going on, and things that they're experiencing? Allow all ideas to be heard. Okay. Make members feel good about their contribution, even when it may be something that is erroneous or off topic. Thanking them for their reflection is always important. Okay. Ideas and decisions should be a group nominated. Okay. This is where we're coming up with all of our rules about the direction we're headed. This should be a group process. Okay. And being supportive of each of the group members. Okay. These are all things that you as a facilitator will bring to the table. And sometimes it is going to be modeling the behavior, such as looking for contributions towards a direction or an idea or rules in the group, or giving positive feedback to group members who share something, and giving that kind of modeling, okay, and being supportive. Okay. So again, why do we need good facilitation skills? Well, it allows for good planning. It allows for us to really look at what we're doing in a group to make sure that that group is effective and it's achieving the goals of the group. Okay. It keeps members involved. Um, it allows for leadership opportunity among the group members. It increases skills through the role modeling that you'll do as a facilitator. And it also role models good communication. How should we be towards each other? And good facilitation skills also teach how to resolve conflict. For example, that example I gave earlier about instead of just calling someone out being directly wrong, which is going to increase their defensiveness and increase the potential of conflict, letting them know that they were heard and then providing that different perspective or that different way of seeing something is a good way to kind of resolve conflict in the beginning. But we'll also look at some other skills that does this as well as we move through this section. Okay. So to be a good facilitator, we need to understand what our goals are. What is our purpose here in the group? Okay. And this is important because sometimes I have seen where a facilitator goes into a group and wants to have this whole big kumbaya moment, create close-knit friendships, create people who are very positive towards each other. And while those are good methods to increase communication within a group, they're not the goals, okay? For example, in an addiction group, the goal is either reduce consumption or sobriety. If we're looking at trauma, it's about putting in good coping skills to deal with trauma triggers that allow the person to heal instead of continually being re-traumatized by either the memory or the abusiveness that exists within their home. Okay. When we look at survivor groups for things like cancer, it is about allowing the person to live a healthy life and understand this kind of trauma, which we'll call cancer, is part of them, but it doesn't own them. Okay, those are a lot different than wanting the group members to like each other and all of those kinds of things. Okay, so a good facilitator understands why they are there in that group. Okay. Keeping the group and the agenda moving forward. So making sure that the group doesn't stagnate on any given topic and making sure that progression is made. Okay. A good facilitator involves everyone and doesn't put in barriers where other group members may not feel like they can be involved in the group. Okay. And they assure that decisions for the group are democratic. While we have our goals, the way we move forward is making sure that all group members are kind of on board, or at least the majority, by providing some autonomy to kind of make decisions on how to move through the treatment process of a group. Okay. So let's start with planning a good process. And we got to look at 4 different things when we look at planning. Okay. Climate, environment, logistics, and room arrangement. I need to look real quick. Okay. When we talk about the climate, we are talking about the basic affect in the room. What type of affect do we want to um, have our group members experience. And this is all before we even get to the group. Do we want to create a positive climate? Do we want to create a more melancholy environment? And I want to reflect on this for just a minute to kind of explain what we mean by climate, okay? Is if we go back to those performance matrices, okay, we saw different ways of getting the highest performance, and it's always in that middle ground, okay? So when groups are too positive, performance goes down. When groups are too more on that sad, depressive side, performance goes down. And so it's important to maintain it so that our group is always kind of in that middle area of positivity versus negativity. Okay. And I will be honest with you, there are times where I have had, in the beginning of group, I ask how good their week went. And if someone says, I had the greatest week in the world, I would purposely ask them, well, what's at least one challenge you had during this week? Okay. Now, what is the purpose of that? Just to bring that level of excitement down to a moderate level. Okay. And similarly, when someone comes in and says, I had the most horrible week ever, asking them to say, well, in all that horrible, there must have been something good that happened. Can you tell us anything that you can think of that was good? Okay. And believe it or not, they usually will find one or two things. What are we doing in this? We're trying to take that low negative mood and bring it up a little bit. Okay. And this is what planning is. So what are you going to do how are you going to maintain a moderate affect to where the group is really, really effective in their processing of the information for that day? What is your plan to do that? Environment is making sure that the physical environment is where it should be. Okay, these are things like, is the room clean? Is it temperate, not too cold, not too hot? Is it at that, what is the room temperature? 72 degrees, I think it is. Is the lighting okay in the room? All of those environmental things that make it so that they feel like they're coming into a place that is going to support their healing. Okay. And then, of course, there's the logistics. The logistics is do you need handouts for this group? Are you going to provide snacks or coffee? Making sure all of those things are in place before the group. There's nothing that disrupts a group more than if your snacks are late or your coffee isn't brewed by the time the group is ready to get going. All of those things have little impacts, but significant impacts on the group's ability to process. Okay. And then the last one is the room's arrangement. Okay. And again, I go back to something we talked about at the beginning of the semester. Usually it is a good idea for the first couple groups to have chairs stacked. Okay. And then as group members come in, have them form a circle. Okay. If they're going to need a surface to write on, have them arrange the tables to where they still would need to interact with each other, but they're doing it in a way that is comfortable for them. Okay. And then after the, probably second, maybe third time you do this, then before the group starts, go in and set up the group room kind of based upon their comfort level of how they liked it for the first 2 or 3 sessions. Okay. Again, groups that are kind of fixed, so that the facilitators feel like they need to control the room. So they put the chairs where they want, and they make sure that there's name cards, and so you're forced to sit somewhere. Because what they're trying to do is trying to create diversity, making it so people don't always sit who they're comfortable with, those types of things, get to know us kind of processes. That is not a good idea during the first stage of group formation, okay? Because what we're trying to do is create an environment that a person feels safe in, that they feel like they can have some control and autonomy over. And if we don't create that, then any of those, get to know someone you haven't talked to activities or any of that other stuff just doesn't work. Okay. And we find that when participants are kind of forced to sit in certain places for a groups, the groups go through that storming phase much longer. Why? Because they don't feel like they have ownership, autonomy, and power in that setting. Okay. So kind of think about those things while you're setting it up and setting up your room arrangements. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the first meeting where you're going to set up your common ground rules. Okay. Now, usually you will have a disclosure form that you will need to go over. The agency requires it. They'll require signatures of each of the group members, those kinds of things that give the limitations of things like confidentiality, give ground rules for the organization's building, restrooms, all those kinds of things, expectations of attendance, all of those kind of logistical, if we go back to that first list, all of those logistical things that need to be discussed in a group. And then we go into what we call the common ground rules. And we usually start with some to kind of seed if there's any others that the group wants. So some very common rules to start with is one person at a time talks. If it's a larger group, ask that they raise their hand. This is especially in groups if you're getting up to that 9, 10 or more rules. Yes, Grace, housekeeping rules. Thank you. Listen to others. Don't be talking or saying things while someone else is talking. No mocking or attacking. Be on time, respect each other's, and in this, respect each other's privacy. And this is where you can go a little bit more into the confidentiality things, such as if you're going to talk about things that were said in the group, don't mention real names or names of other participants. Don't mention even male, female, those kinds of things. So you can tell the stories, but don't give any personal identifying information while you're processing the information you learn from the group with outside individuals such as your partner or friends. Okay. And this is really emphasize it during confidentiality, but then emphasize it again when you talk about respect for each other and each other's privacy. Okay. And then, so you kind of give these, and then you say to the group, what other rules would you all like for your group? And you can say, we can start with an expansive list. And if there's ones that we don't need, we can just cross them out. And we can always add some if we need to. And again, groups do different things. I think I mentioned this a week or so ago. I've had some groups who don't allow chewing gum to groups who didn't wanted to make sure that there were no children in the group. Okay, that you don't bring your children to group or whatnot. And so they can vary from group to group what they add to these lists. And it's always kind of interesting because it lets you into the personality that the group is going to be. How are they going to really interact with each other? That one that did no chewing gum treated each other very professionally. It was almost like it was a work group and not a treatment group. And the groups that didn't want any children, they were very engaging in their stories about what happened to them because they didn't have the children, quote unquote, they're listening. And so they felt they were a lot more empathetic and feeling towards each other, which was kind of interesting as well. So doing this, establishing it, and then remember that you are the role model. You are the one who is going to model these behaviors throughout. So if there's no chewing gum, no chewing gum. If there's no kids, there's no kids. If there's no, you can't bring dinner to the group, then no dinner. Those kind of things you role model as the facilitator for the group. Okay. Now let's kind of go through some of what we should be looking at as we move through the group process. Okay. So one of the things we should always encourage is to start on time. Okay. Now I've always tried to do this with my classes, but my classes aren't treatment groups, but making sure that in a group, one of the things that shows respect for each other is when all the participants are there and ready to go at a given time. Okay. And you can do this personally. Say group starts at 5, and that's when we'll begin, or be here by 5. We are going to officially start group at 5:05. But making sure you model that for your group members is important. That if you say, we're going to start at 5 after the hour, you have your watch there, and right at 5 after the hour, you start, because that's modeling behavior. Okay. Welcome and thank everyone for coming and showing up and being there for this experience. And I will say you really should do this with every group when you do a welcome statement, and making sure everyone feels appreciated for showing up and being there, even on those times they don't want to. Make introductions. So if you have, for example, open groups, introducing new members. If it's a closed group, this is something you do in the first, maybe second sessions, and whatnot. Okay. The next thing is then to kind of go over, what are we going to be doing today? So reviewing our agenda, objectives, and ground rules. Now that sounds really official, but let me kind of say kind of how this works in the group is say, so last week, you remember we were working on our triggers and identifying our triggers. Okay. And hopefully you went through this week and you started writing down when you are triggering to something, when you're getting that craving feeling, for example, for an alcohol or a drug of some type, and you wrote it down. And this week, what our goal is to kind of look at those triggers and see if we can't find some common themes. Okay. And then so you're setting up the agenda and providing the objectives. We're working on triggers, and this week we're going to start looking at, is there themes that trigger us to, for example, use or go through a trauma process. And then you want to remind them of the ground rules and say, we want everyone to participate. This is a safe place for us to process our experiences. And yeah, and making sure that those ground rules, remember the rules we set up for the group, those kinds of things. And then encourage participation. And this sometimes is started with, for example, thinking check-ins. Okay. So this week we're going to go around the room, and I want everybody to provide us with 3 positive things that they experienced this last week. Or it may be what is significant issues you're faced with right now, and allowing participants to go through and say, yeah, my week's been da 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 da, and encouraging that participation. The next thing is stick to the agenda, okay? And this is making sure you get through what the goal for that session is. So in this example we've been using, it's let's start to identify common themes that we trigger to, okay? And when you notice that participants are starting to talk about, well, in a lot of groups, they will go, yeah, I triggered and it brought back memories of use. And I really had, okay, bringing them back and say, okay, what is common then that creates that trigger, and bringing them back to where they need to be, okay? And then we get to the end. So now that we've found some common themes, for this week, I want us to commit to doing an additional thing. I want you to continue to explore your triggers, but let's start using a coping skill to start managing those triggers, and then maybe introducing a coping skill during that session, okay? And then get commitment from everyone, okay? And then bring closure to each item. Okay, and then now we're getting near the end, so we can go around the room and do a summary with group members saying, what did you learn? What did you experience today? And what are you going to do? That's one way to summarize. Sometimes the facilitator can provide the summary of what the group went through, especially if time is getting tight. And then make sure, again, you thank your participants, and then you close the meeting, okay? By saying, thank you for coming today. I'm going to go lock the, no, I'm going to go lock the door right now if you don't leave. No, don't say that. I'm just joking. And so you bring closure, okay? Now, this is the basic outline of a process, of doing a process with a group. And one thing that I would encourage you to do is whatever process you develop for your meeting, okay, make sure you use that process for each group, okay? Because one of the things that a lot of people who have gone through trauma and going through addiction or surviving something like cancer, or any of those types of groups, or especially even mental health groups, such as groups for depression or anxiety or PTSD, is that something that gets lost within that chaos of whatever is going on is the ability to predict and control, okay? And making sure that each group is predictable, that I can show up to this place, and what makes this place safe is I know exactly what we're going to experience in this group. And modeling, setting up a non-chaotic environment for a person, that this is how we can engage our world if we want to get rid of all the chaos that goes on with whatever issue that is brought to the table, okay? All right, I'm going to skip this for just a minute, because what I do want us to engage in, and then we'll wrap up for today, is I want us to engage in emotional intelligence. As I said when the class wasn't recording, emotional intelligence is what makes it so that we can go from, we can make sure that we have empathy for other individuals, but instead of trying to escape that empathy, we engage in helping, we engage in the process. So what we're trying to do is make empathy a way to connect with our clients, to understand our clients, and to engage in the healing and helping process. Okay. So emotional intelligence, let me kind of get into a little bit of explanation, is defined as the ability to perceive and express emotions, to assimilate emotions and thought, understand reasons of emotions, and to regulate emotions of self and others. Okay. If I were to give this a behavioral kind of definition, it is the ability to walk into a room, understand my emotions and my feelings, and look at other people in that room and see that they may have similar emotions or different emotions than I am, but mine are independent of theirs. What I am feeling, they may not be feeling, and that is okay. And it's that ability then to manage your own emotional state in order to create a productive, healthy conversation. Okay. So it's really a lot about that emotional regulation of the individual, which starts with things like self-awareness, and then being able to see that other people can have their own emotions and feelings too, and that's okay. Not everyone needs to feel like I do. Okay. So some other terms that have been used for emotional intelligence is executive competencies, interpersonal communication, relationship management. You'll often hear it heard as social intelligence and leadership development. And I do want to warn you really quick about if you want to do more research on emotional intelligence. I would encourage you not to look at the literature that comes out of business because they have issues using words like emotions and relationships and social intelligence. And in their research, they don't look at emotional intelligence. They look at what's called emotional reactivity. Okay. And that is when someone is very quick to react to the emotions in the room and they're very reactive. That is not what we're talking about when we talk about emotional intelligence in the literature that shows this is good for leaders, this is good for executives to have, this is good for everyone. Emotional intelligence is not emotional reactivity, okay? It is about being able to manage one's emotions and the emotional tone of the room, okay? So, and here's some differences, if we think about IQ versus EQ, when we talk about IQ, we're talking about cognition, intelligence, and logic, personal information, memory bank, vocabulary, acquiring and using knowledge. When we're talking about our emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, we're talking about emotional regulation, social and communication regulation, grasping how one feels and others want and needs, and gauge how well one copes with environmental demands and pressures. Okay. So if we look at it just from this kind of scale here, if we look at it from a visual perspective, okay, we look at things like personal competencies versus social competence. So personal competence and recognition, what I see is self-awareness, okay? Knowing how I feel in reaction to what's going on in my environment, okay? Social competence is social awareness. How is the person I'm interacting with experiencing their environment? How are they experiencing me? Okay. And I'll give some examples of where these can go awry. Is a lot of times, and that this neither is a judge, this is not a judgment statement, But what attracts people to a certain field is their own personal experience. So, for example, in the addiction field, a lot of treatment providers went through addiction. When we talk about relationship violence and domestic violence, a lot of them went through domestic violence and experienced their survivors themselves. Cancer survivor group, all of them tend to have a number of individuals who had that experience, and that's what motivated them to go into the field. Okay. However, if there's not a high level of self-awareness of how they're reacting to what their clients are telling them, they can re-victimize themselves and re-traumatize themselves, as well as because they're going through a trauma experience because of what the client is saying, they're making it so the client can't achieve something, they can't get beyond their own trauma. Okay. It's sometimes called countertransference. So this self-awareness as part of emotional intelligence is understanding if I'm reacting in a triggered or negative way to what my clients are saying, and making the regulation to say, I'm not going to let this traumatize me right now. I am here for my client. Okay. And my emotions and the way I'm reacting to this is not healthy for my client or for me for that matter. So that's the personal competence end. The social competence is realizing when your clients are going through trauma and they're re-traumatizing themselves, and how do you manage that? And how do you bring them back to a productive place of being? Okay. And we're going to learn a lot of skills on how to do this, dealing things with silence, reflection, all of these things. And all of this will be under what we call relationship management. And these are skills that we will learn over the next couple weeks as we go through this relationship management component. But I cannot emphasize enough, class, it all starts with you. Okay, and the personal competence. And that's why we're going to go through this this exercise during this week to see where you are with your emotional intelligence. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for right now, and I'm going to explain what we're going to do